Okay, for the third time. Hello, party people. Let's see if my mic is actually picking this up. It does look like it is. Unfortunately, now I don't have my friggin' vid cover up. And my Avast browser has dropped out. Okay, let's see if we've got this good now. It does look like it. Okay. So I have attempted to do this 3 times. This is, of course, the charm, because now I can actually see that my microphone is properly picking me up. So, for the third time, things are what they are. Difficult technicalities afflict us all. So, today we're obviously covering the John Candy documentary, I Like Me, from this year. And, yeah, it's one of those things where it does kind of tug the heartstrings. We'll get into the recommendations, the ranking, and all that stuff in a bit. But first, I have to give Amazon MGM a nice little shout out. So I'd like to shout out MGM, Amazon Prime, whatever the new company is, for realizing their contribution to the dumbing down of Western civilization has been so successful they now have to translate a once common knowledge Latin phrase, ars gratia artis, for the audience. Well fucking done. Yeah. Yeah, so it starts off with the English, morphs into the solid golden ribbon, and then, of course, we get the lion and everything. Yeah. So, good job, Amazon. Twits. So, the film does start off significantly earlier than this, but I didn't want to start with the funeral, though that is where it starts. It starts at the funeral. It's kind of a bit of an interesting study of Catholic ritual. Well, just tuck that in, because that's uncomfortable. But I wanted to start with this, because this is the first of the remembrances of the testimonials, the memorials of him. And Bill Murray, yeah. Bill Murray has to be one of the most anomalous people in Hollywood. He's a legitimate old-school celebrity in the vein of the great drinker madmen, or madcap drinkers, depending on your mood or his. Excuse me. But he's in that vein of O'Toole, Richard Harris, people like that who had that big bravura sort of personality. I mean, he's known as much for his work on screen as he is for the legendary anecdotes that are told about him. And at the same time, he's still an utterly sincere and emotionally in touch, emotionally communicative human being. And in a time and a town so full of fakery, that's a rarity. And, I mean, he is genuinely mournful about his friend. It's incredibly poignant to watch Bill Murray talk about John Candy. And there is a moment where, well, I didn't expect a laugh at the beginning of a documentary about someone who was dead. Dan Aykroyd, his tribute is played over this. He's over a montage of him and Candy together. That happens a fair bit, where they have people talking about John and they show shots of them collaborating. It was well written and very heartfelt. One of the lines from it is that John Candy lived as full a life as any human can live. And I had to say that's definitely a great way to be remembered. The interspersal of the home movies, the film clips, the sketch shows, or the sketches from shows, rather, of Candy. I mean, it's revealing immediately. It brings you immediately into the tone of the film, of the way that this story is going to be told. And at the same time, and early on, it's an emotional roller coaster. You go from feeling kind of down to hitting Bill Murray, bringing you back up, and then you kind of come up and down over and over and over. And it's really one of those things where, wow, it's a well done documentary, which probably gives a hint about my recommendation or not. Let's see, next up. When you watch shows like this, films like this, documentaries about people who were famous, you don't always get a lot of background. And knowing someone's celebrity status doesn't usually prepare you to learn that, yeah, they really badly wanted to enlist in the American Army during Vietnam. One of his friends describes him as the sort of person who wanted to protect the world. And this is part of the reason he wanted to sign up. Unfortunately, because of a high school football injury, he lost his, I believe it's left kneecap, and wasn't, it's assumed he wasn't taken by the Army for that reason, because of that injury. And as someone with, bad knees, damn, that had to have been brutal. I did say here, I don't think the dog liked him. Not at all. I don't think his dog liked him at all. The history of his career is fascinating when you see it from the perspective of his colleagues, the people who lived through the process with him. This is the old SCTV crew. This is basically my childhood right there. Like this was my comedy awakening, where these guys, Wayne and Schuster, the two Ronnies, but these guys always held a special place in my heart because, you know, it was the Canadian madcap guys. Wayne and Schuster, yeah, they were madcap, but they weren't quite as edgy as these guys could be. I did say that I did think that, and I do have to say, I will continue to hold this opinion until I die, I think, that he was so versatile that had he been given slightly more serious roles, he could have been Jim Carrey before Jim Carrey. He was Canadian, he was a great comedian, but he was also a very good serious actor, and could really make you feel what he was trying to make you feel. I believe he's Orson Welles here, so this one's interesting. I'm not sure who the woman with him is. I have to put my pages down so that I can do this. I need a prop. If you're old enough to remember this, you're going to laugh, because you are about to see a 3D commercial. Yeah. Cockamamie, brilliant, genius, absolutely hilarious. I remember watching these things, and I mean, I still do that to my friends every now and again. I'll just grab something and I'll go, hey, 3D commercial. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's a tiny, tiny bit, but it is just so brilliant, so innovative as comedy. It stuck. They were doing the 3D commercial because of some gag that they had done, but it was just come up with on the spot. Candy was an incredible improv, apparently. Let me see, what else have we got here? Oh, the Schmengies. I remember the Schmengies. If you remember the Schmengies, you too are old. Yes, you are. Again, SCTV. What else do we got next? Okay, so after SCTV, he started to get into film. Now, the first film, excuse me, that he was in was called 1941. I didn't have a lot of luck getting good screenshots for it, so I skipped it and instead took one from Stripes, which is one of the first films I remember watching John Candy in. Over here. And yeah, Stripes is a very good movie. But, you know, no matter how famous he got, he was apparently always humble, and a lot of people do talk about that. Here you can see he's kind of downplaying a compliment that some interviewer has given him, and the emotion on his face, that, come on, it's genuine, and yeah, I don't think he ever really knew the impact and influence he had while he was alive, but yeah, always humble. Now it's a bit of a dark note, and I do apologize, I do tend to get my Belushis mixed up, but this is Jim Belushi. No, it's John. See, I do get them mixed up. This is John Belushi's death that we're talking about in 1982. Of course, he was famously in The Blues Brothers with Dan Aykroyd. Uh, and, I mean, that's also one of my favorite films. So, yeah. Uh, One of the things with John is that death did weigh on him very heavily. He had lost his father when he was only 5 years old. The family didn't talk about it. So there was a bit of an emotional stunt, or stunting, that kind of happened to him. Uh, yeah. Uh, the people who were remembering Candy in this, one of the sour notes, and it's pretty much the only real sour note that really caught my attention. Uh, at one point, he had lost weight, and excuse me. Apparently, some hacky talent agent had said something stupid like, "Oh, don't lose any more weight," because apparently they wanted him fat. Uh, I can't imagine why, but to be fair, when you look at other heavy comedians who have lost significant amounts of weight, not significant, but extreme amounts of weight, it's somewhat questionable as to whether or not the comedy lives in the adipose. Uh, Kind of like Samson's strength was in his hair. Maybe the comedy is in the chub. Who knows? Uh, but one of the things that irritated me was that the person who was talking about this particular situation, and I do apologize, I don't remember who it was, but they blamed addiction and the Hollywood kind of machine for the pressure that he was under for his size issue. And that's a bit of a sour note to me because regardless, we all make our own choices, and it's on us to know, to consider, to think about whether or not we're making choices that are good for us. So, yeah. Uh, There's a shot of Tom Hanks and him screwing around on the set of Splash. Hanks points out that Candy was very collaborative, and that shocked him because, of course, coming out of the Hollywood machine, in comedy acting, regardless, on screen, unlike improv, it tends to be competitive. And there's a real schism between improv and acting comedy, theatrical comedy, where in improv, which is where Candy came from, it's very important to be collaborative, to kind of do the yes and sort of thing. Whereas Hanks was not expecting that, and it kind of threw him for a minute. So there's that. There's a wonderful story that's told about how Jack Nicholson walked in somewhere that John was drinking, and John ended up staying out all night, even though he was on a film production, drinking with Jack Nicholson. I have to say that in the middle of the 80s, I probably would have stayed out all night drinking with Jack Nicholson too. Oh, and I also had to point out, I don't think he liked his dog either. Now, I'm assuming this is the same dog, because it's always a Labrador Retriever. And yes, this is a Labrador Retriever. This isn't a Golden Retriever or some sort of short-haired. This is a Labrador Retriever. There's two colors for Labrador Retrievers. There's yellow labs and there's black labs. And apparently now also chocolate labs, but yeah. The black lab is the more commonly known one, but this is a Labrador Retriever. Yeah, I don't think he liked the dog either. Conan O'Brien being an admirer of Candy was something of a shock. And Conan did absolutely fanboy the hell out over John Candy. And the story that Conan tells is about how Candy had come to, I believe, his college, to their improv group, to, I guess, be a bit of a mentor. Sorry, folks. Let me get a drop of water in me. Maybe that'll help. I am feeling a little dry. So, yeah, Conan, being a real fanboy for him, kind of threw me for a minute. Let's see. What do we got next? Yeah. Every time you see Candy interacting with his kids, he's clearly a good father. One of the reasons that it's mentioned that he's a good father and a family member, one of the reasons behind that that's suggested is that he was just a big kid himself. Maybe. I mean, there's definitely a quality of innocence, excuse me, of innocence in his face when you see him. So possibly. Let's see, Mel Brooks. I'm ashamed to say I'd forgotten that Mel Brooks was the director for one of my favorite Star Wars movies, Spaceballs. Yes, I know. I'll get to it. But one of the things that Mel did say about him was how much of a real person he was. And Mel, the quote is, he stuck acting in his back pocket and behaved like a human being. And he went on to say that he was a full person. And again, in a place like Hollywood, that sucks the life out of you in some ways, or the vitality in some ways. It's really rare that someone could manage to be that way. And of course, Spaceballs. Because Spaceballs. Yes, Spaceballs. And his full name is Bartholomew. If you don't know that scene, you probably haven't seen Spaceballs. If you haven't seen Spaceballs, pause this video right now, go watch it, and come back. No, I'm serious. If you haven't seen Spaceballs, pause it now and come back. Because it's worth watching. Yeah. And as I said, I'm a massive Star Wars fan. And yet, Spaceballs is one of my favorite Star Wars movies. And it's a parody. It's a complete spoof. But it's so good. Another thing I was surprised about, which, had I remembered that I actually did enjoy Uncle Buck, Macaulay Culkin was in that movie. Macaulay Culkin actually acted in a bunch of movies with John Candy. Or at least he was in 2 with Candy that I know of. Macaulay Culkin pointing out that he and Molly Ringwald only did a third of the John Hughes movies that John Candy did is kind of important. Culkin has clearly been through it. He's been a victim of the Hollywood hollow-out, which I've talked about many times. And he seems good. I think he's in a good place. And he's definitely gotten healthier than he was. Let's see. Yeah, Uncle Buck. Also, great movie. If you haven't seen that, pause the... Well, you know, you're going to end up pausing the video a bunch if you listen to what I say. So maybe don't. But Culkin talking about how kind Candy was as a human reminds me of the real way to be immortal, which is to be kind enough to be remembered. Yeah. This is a shot from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That's a fake book, but it's kind of funny. It's a good joke, too. Yeah, but also from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Steve Martin talks about this scene where his character is just ripping into candies. And you can really see... It's harder to see in a still, but in the film itself, in the documentary, and in the movie itself, of course, and yes, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is another one I recommend. It's one of those things where you can see how hurt he is, and it expresses through the screen so well that you kind of tend to feel it too. It's the mark of a great actor, in my opinion. And of course, he said the line. One of the things I did want to point out too is during interspersed in this is the part of the interview with Chris Columbus, and he compares Candy to Chaplin in terms of how he could make you feel something without saying a word, not even necessarily without moving. Of course, then we come to Home Alone. This was a whirlwind shoot for Candy. Apparently, he had one day, 24 friggin' hours, that he could give to this movie. The first hour he was there, he was telling everybody to take their time getting ready. Wow. And then he shot for 23. Brutal. Yeah. He was apparently a real workhorse. Oh, yeah. I did have to say, though, he had terrible taste in cigarettes. Fucking Rothmans? Gross. Yeah. uh, I had forgotten. I did know this, but I had forgotten that he and Wayne Gretzky had purchased part of the Argos, along with I forget this guy's name. It'll come up. Uh, but yeah, he as a former high school football player, one of his dreams had been to be a football player in the future. And of course, because of the knee injury, it just didn't happen. And it's little shock that he's very proud of having purchased part of the Argos. And then, of course, they went on to win the Grey Cup, which, for those of you in the States or elsewhere, the Grey Cup is essentially Canada's Super Bowl. And yeah, it's one of those things where um, he deserves to be proud of what he's accomplished at that point. Of course, at the time, there was also a lot of pressure on him. He was getting depressed, anxious, and over this image, one of the things that's said is, and by him, when you make winning your whole life, you have to keep winning. That kind of pressure, yeah, it's going to wear on a person. And of course, they talk about how Candy led with his heart, did favors for people that weren't necessarily returned, how he got, kind of used a fair bit, and occasionally betrayed by people. Gary McNall was the guy's name. He pled guilty to fraud, and apparently did a few shady business things that he had promised Candy he wouldn't do. Yeah, unfortunate when you're a trusting person. Sometimes it does hurt. Towards the end, he was in therapy, but he was having anxiety attacks as well. Don Lake, I believe, is the guy's name, who started on Wagons East with him. He talks about how at one point on the way to the set, Candy had to stop and kind of compose himself because he was having an anxiety attack. And Don had suggested going back to the trailer or what have you, and Candy had basically completely vetoed it because he didn't want to let people down. He had, of course, a lot of pressure when you're the director for a big production. So, yeah, I kind of understand where he was coming from. But apparently the entirety of the Wagons East shoot was just a rough go for him. Uh, Now we're coming towards the end. And this image is the first of a montage of sets that John worked on. But he's never shown, and you really feel it's a very powerful image, especially after so many memories of how expansive he was. It's extremely jarring to suddenly see these sets empty, especially when a lot of the time when they shoot him, it's like this. He's absolutely the big focus. uh, I forget exactly who it was that called him by the word, but he said it's a word that's not used a lot anymore to describe people, and described him as grand. And yeah, when you watch this film and you start to find out some of the things about Candy that weren't necessarily common knowledge, yeah, grand is definitely one of the words that comes to mind in many different meanings. Of course, now uh, Dan Aykroyd talking about how he was driving when he first heard the news and basically went completely off the road and just about smoked somebody's, how did he put it? Uh, the Pink Flamingo and I think he said lawn jockey at one point. Which, it was the 80s, or, well, mid 90s. So, yeah, understandable. But there are a few things more to be aspired to than to live a life that, when your friends and fellows hear it has ended, they have a flood of memories about you. And this is what Aykroyd mentions, that a flood of memories came up when he was thinking about John after he had died. And we do end where we began, at the funeral. If I recall correctly, this is St. Basil's Cathedral in Toronto. Yeah, the service was very nice. It was attended by RCMP members, Toronto Police, OPP. I believe there were a few politicians that I saw in attendance as well. And yeah, I mean, how did Eugene Levy put it? You know you've made it when they're closing freeways for you. Yeah, and he did point out that this was only the third time that the freeway had been closed in Toronto. The first was for the Pope, and another was for the President. So yeah, he did recall that as they were driving all the exits, he saw police officers, saluting and ushering them on. Culkin called him a unicorn at one point, and essentially a mythical creature that leaves a particular silhouette when he's gone. And this is another shot from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but it's a good way to remember John, is that he was always... Very rarely do you see him not smiling or engaged in some sort of foolery. And yeah, I did have to say that, of course, there are outtakes and little nods in the credits and things like that. This is actually from the Deadpool movie. The second one, Deadpool versus Wolverine. But yeah, my little piece for this. John Candy was a favorite actor of mine from the time I was a child until my last year of high school in '94. His was probably the first celebrity death that actually touched me. It's nice to know that he was such a good person to others. And, yeah, I mean... It's one of those things where... I mean, I was aware of the concept of death, but it hadn't really touched me at that point. Lost a few slightly extended family members and things like that, but no one particularly close. And none of the celebrities that I was following had passed away at that point either. And I think Candy was probably the first one who did. So, kind of indelible in my mind. And, yeah. Now, let's talk about the technical side of this. Do I recommend this film? Absolutely. It is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Colin Hanks did a great job. In terms of a rank, as a documentary, I have to give it a 10. Because it stayed on point. It didn't wander from the subject. Candy was the subject the entire time. Nobody talked about anything else. Nobody talked about, we were working with this person, blah, blah, blah. No, Candy was always the focus, which is exactly what it should be for a documentary. The only point I'll take away, and I do rank it a 10 as a documentary. As a general film, there is one point where there's what looked to me like a weird use of special digital effects. They're zooming in on a photo where Candy is holding a cigarette. And for whatever reason, now it may be an artifact of the zooming in process, but it looked to me to be a digital effect where the smoke was moving as you got closer. In such a way that it clearly wasn't just the image being brought towards the camera. And that, I had to say, was extremely weird. A strange choice. Struck me as a bit of a waste of a bit of budget that could have been used for something else. I will point out also part of the reason that Deadpool features in the post-credits somewhat prominently is because Ryan Reynolds was one of the producers. So, I don't know if the IMDb page is working. It wasn't when I started recording. We will see if it is now. Does not appear to be. Let's see if we can reload it. Okay, it's up, but this isn't what I'm looking for. Let's try I Like Me. Oops. Well, it was close, but not quite right. There. Here we are. Okay, so fortunately the trivia is very short, but I did want to look at the... we'll give you a quick look at a part of the trailer here. Yeah, okay. Moving on. There's loads of photos. Reynolds has managed to insert himself in quite a lot, which is fine. I mean, he was probably one of the big money people behind it. I'm sure John Candy was big for him too. There's the cast. Of course, you have, you know, Dan, Dave, Martin, Eugene, Andrea Martin, loads of people. Uh, Loads of people talked about what a gentleman he was, things like that. The life and legacy of the iconic funny man John Candy, who died of a heart attack in '94 at the age of 43. It's hard to believe he was 7 years younger than I am now when he passed. So the trivia we'll have a quick look at. It's only, I believe there was only 3 entries, yeah. The title comes from one of his lines in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, I Like Me. We won't worry about Mark Carney because I have something else planned. John Candy co-starred in Splash with director Colin Hanks' father, Tom Hanks. While not mentioned in this documentary, the 2 actors also acted together in Volunteers a year later. I didn't know that, and I'm probably going to go have a look for Volunteers at some point. The Goofs I wanted to have a look at. In the additional material section of the closing credits, Who's Harry Crumb is listed as Who is Harry Crumb? Fail. After the title card saying 1950, there's a shot of flags, including the current Canadian flag. Yeah, that wasn't our flag at the time. The maple leaf wasn't introduced until 1965. At the time, we would have had the red ensign. And memorable quotes. And this is from right at the beginning, talking about John Candy. Bill Murray, I can't tell you what was right about John Candy or what was wrong, but he was my friend, and I don't want to cry, but when I see him, when you see his face, I mean, yeah. Eugene Levy said he was amazingly funny himself when he was acting as Uncle Buck. You stick around in Hollywood long enough, everyone... I'm sorry, this is wrong. This is actually Macaulay Culkin's quote. You stick around in Hollywood long enough, everyone either goes crazy or turns into an asshole, or they end up dead. We won't cover that last quote, will we? Oh, yeah, actually, we will. I think, not 100% sure, but I think this was Aykroyd. I could have it wrong, though. I'm going to give it out today in the manner in which he would have wanted it. You have been accorded a great honor. You stand up and walk to the front of the room, and without grief or weeping, deliver loudly, clearly, short, and straight to the salient points, the best tribute in oratory possible from the heart of an allied professional, a creative brother, and a fellow Canadian who loved this boy from the Donlands, like we had the same blood. We salute first a patriot who always professed and promoted the positive interests of the North, but who also welcomed into his fold Americans and was enfolded in turn by them. Like all on our planet, they eventually came to see his indistillable value. This is no meager life we reflect on today. This is as full of life as any human can live. Joy, emotional abundance of spirit, infectious rage, a tinge of Lugosi-like madness with his bottom reverse vampire teeth and all, a titan of a gentle golden man, magnificent of visage, eyes, and frame. Let none be deceived by what the less enlightened would label as girth, for there are many witnesses to the clamping power of his mitts and the steel in his forearms, the quickness and lightness of foot and leg. Challenge him and you would be hurled away like a toy. There's a word in our language we don't hear much anymore, but it applies to Candy. The word is grand. He was a grand man. John Franklin Candy, devoted son, brother, altar boy, student, salesman, stage, radio, and television writer and performer, world-famous comedy ambassador, farce and dramatic actor, international feature film star, director, businessman, connoisseur, percussionist, charitable benefactor, husband, father, and the sweetest, most generous person ever known to me. I loved him from the instant I laid eyes on him in his first impeccable suit, and I will never stop. I do believe that was Dan Aykroyd. And I do believe we are, in fact, done. I believe Dark Dear Heart is actually performed in the early part of the film. We'll come back to the top of the page here now. Let me just bring up the poster so we have that anyway. Yeah, that's my review for John Candy, I Like Me, from this year. It's an original documentary from about 10 days ago. It's on Prime. If you want to watch it, I absolutely recommend it. And yeah, we'll end there, and I will, of course, encourage you all to come and see me on Discordant Dragons tonight with Yiz the Eunuch. That is 6 o'clock Eastern Time on her channels. Also, I will be in chat for my friend Newsfist in about 35 minutes, which means you probably may not have seen this by the time that happens. But if you have, pop over there and say hi too. Other than that, I hope you're doing well. I hope you continue to do well. And as always, rise and rise again until lambs become lions. Bye-bye.
Hello, pretty people. So, you've probably just finished watching one of my videos, and I appreciate your time. That said, if you're watching on YouTube, because they've changed the way they evaluate their views, I need to ask a favor. You need to commit some form of engagement in order for me to have it count as a view, because for some reason YouTube no longer thinks watching something counts as a view. They need some form of engagement to prove you actually watched it, so like, comment, follow, share, subscribe. Any of those things would be appreciated. Other than that, if you want to support me, and this would help me with endeavors across all the platforms I do my content creation on, you can look at Ko-Fi, which is right there in the ticker right at the moment, or you can go over to my Redbubble and pick up some merchandise there. The designs that have been flashing on screen for a while are examples of the designs that I have. You can pick these up on a variety of different products, and yeah, I'll probably end up leaving them up. Though, from time to time, I will put up something that will be time limited. Some of the designs, the Walrus King especially, for example, I intend to leave up all the time because I just love that, and my Ardent Plays logo is for my other Rumble channel. Other than that, I hope you're doing well. I hope you continue to do well. And as always, rise and rise again until lambs become lions. Bye-bye.